Hi there. We're going to talk about Varroa mites today. I've got Paul Kozak here, the provincial apis for the province of Ontario. And Paul's going to talk about the seasonal population dynamics of Varroa mites. And we're going to talk about the importance of treatment and monitoring. We've got two different methods of monitoring that we're going to be showing you. But first off, let's just talk about the Varroa population dynamics. Paul, what's one of the most important things that you think people should know about Varroa mites and beehives?
A few things here, Paul. I would say, first of all, if you've got a colony of honeybees, you've got Varroa mites. And it's always a matter of managing those Varroa mites. Those Varroa mites are always on the increase, and it's key that that population of Varroa mites in that colony is managed, otherwise that colony will die. We have research, actually, that Paul, you were involved in, from the University of Guelph Honeybee Research Center that demonstrates very clearly that Varroa mites will indeed kill a colony if unmanaged. Doesn't matter what people say on their blog on the internet. Good peer-reviewed research specific to Ontario demonstrates that quite clearly. In addition to that, another important thing to know is that, so as I said before, the Varroa mites are always increasing. Anytime that honeybee colony is producing honeybee brood, so developing honeybees, that is allowing the Varroa mites some protection. So a large proportion, most of the Varroa mites are in that brood. They're protected from treatments at times, and they're also using that brood to reproduce themselves, and that's when they get on the increase. So as spring opens up, you start getting brood, your Varroa population immediately starts to climb.
Maybe you could mention a bit about Varroa reproduction in drone brood versus worker brood.
Yes, so drone brood has 3 more days than worker brood, 24 days as opposed to 21, and that makes a big difference in the life stage of Varroa. So Varroa mites actually can, just roughly putting it, double the reproductive capacity within drone brood. The other thing is that, but keeping in mind that anytime you have brood again, those Varroa mites are on the increase. It's also worth mentioning and important to understand that Varroa mites, as the season progresses, their population not only increases, but it increases more dramatically. So it kind of has an exponential population curve and really starts to pick up steam as you get towards the end of the season. And that's where you have to be really careful that you don't have the Varroa population overtaking the honeybee colony, because you can even get the Varroa mites under control, yet you still can have compromised and sick bees, especially going into winter. So you really want to be careful. And that's where treatments come in.
Right.
So I know the focus of this is going to be on monitoring. Treatments are really the way that you are going to manage your Varroa population. There are other cultural control methods, but you want to, on a regular basis, suppress and push down that Varroa population so it doesn't overtake the colony and cause that damage that University of Guelph has researched will kill a colony. Monitoring comes in where that's really your tool for figuring out what are the levels, when should you treat, what type of treatment should you use, and was it effective? So it's really an important tool, monitoring, for figuring out where the Varroa mites are at.
Right. We see pretty big differences year to year based on the kinds of winters we have, the kinds of springs we have, and so on. What times of year would you suggest that people are doing this monitoring? Because we don't really know what we have one year to the next. It's quite variable.
Yeah, and I would say that, to quote Les Eccles, the lead for the technology transfer program, you can't beekeep to a calendar. So Varroa monitoring, even though we are promoting a special week on that, it's not like St. Patrick's Day, where every day you go in and this is the day you're going to, like you said, you get some seasons that are earlier and later. So if you have an earlier spring, that might mean that you want to monitor more early. Your colonies are coming out of winter earlier, and it also has implications for how quickly that Varroa mite population can increase. As you know, anytime you get brood rearing going, the Varroa mites are picking up their population. To put it very basically, I think that there's, you got your opportunity in spring, summer, and fall to maunder. Spring as early as you can, that's ideal. If you are going to be putting a treatment in during spring before the nectar flow, which most beekeepers will have to, it doesn't hurt to actually maunder after to see if that treatment was effective. As you get towards the end of summer, you want to check those Varroa mite levels again at the very basic. And you also want to make sure that if you put a treatment on in fall, which again most beekeepers are going to probably have to do, it's a very good idea to maunder afterwards to figure out if that treatment was effective or not. Treatments will reduce the levels of mites, but you always want to make sure that they're below certain levels. I believe you guys are going to be talking about thresholds later, and that's key to understand. And the only thing worse than having Varroa mite levels that were not knocked down effectively by a treatment is not knowing about it and having the bees go into winter that way.
Right. What happens, Paul, if a colony isn't treated and the Varroa population gets out of control?
Well, the research from the University of Guelph has shown that colony is much more likely to die, and the science has demonstrated that. What we're hearing about now, and that beekeepers are reporting experiences, and we've known about this for a while, is the whole concept of reinfestation, or some people have referred to it as a Varroa bomb. So you could have one honeybee colony that's overrun by Varroa mites, and if that number is so high and that colony starts to crash and it's got all those honey reserves and there are other colonies either within the yard, but if you've got a neighboring yard or another apiary of another beekeeper 3 kilometers away, those bees can easily come in, rob out those honey stores, and the mites simply walk over and jump ship. And so this really gets to maundering is important for the health of your individual colonies, your individual operation, but beekeepers need to recognize that they're part of a community and a population, and if they're not effectively managing their Varroa mites, they could be harming another person's bees, even when that beekeeper is trying to do the right thing and doing everything they need to. When we talk about maundering, we can see that there's quite a few colonies here, and I don't think anyone is expecting that you're going to maunder every colony every time you go into the yard. You have to fit that into the schedule, whether you're a hobbyist or a commercial beekeeper. But let's say very simply put, 3 would be the bare minimum that you would want to do. That's what we do in apiary inspections as a minimum standard. But something like 5 in a yard of 30 colonies would probably be ideal. You are going to get variation. But it's important to recognize that you want to get a regular schedule of maundering. You want to get a proportion of the colonies you're operating with, and you also want to document that information. If you're like me, you'll remember it really well at first, and then maybe 2 days later you'll say, "What were those levels again?"
Yeah, write it down for sure.
Exactly.
Thanks very much, Paul. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Your insights there. Now we're going to look at 2 different methods of monitoring for mites. We're going to use sticky paper with screen bottom board and alcohol wash as well. Those are coming right up. Thank you.